The coffee spilled in slow motion, a dark arc across the gleaming mahogany table, stopping just inches from Naomi Carter Ellsworth's shoes. It was the kind of moment that, to most people, might seem like a careless accident. But Naomi had been in enough boardrooms to know when something was deliberate. The liquid glistened in the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the thin wisp of steam curling upward into the chill of the air-conditioned space. She could smell the bitter roast even before the cup clattered against the saucer, its sound echoing off the marble walls. Her mind flicked briefly to her grandfather's words, spoken years ago in a voice hoarse from age and experience. Some people will try to test you before they even know who you are. She had not expected the test to come so soon, nor for it to be so clumsy. She didn't flinch. Not when the coffee nearly kissed the leather of her shoes. Not when Gregory Stanton, senior manager of Sterling and Pierce Financial Group, leaned back with a smirk that seemed carved into his face. "Might want to clean that up before the real meeting starts," he said, as if she were part of the custodial staff rather than the morning's intern cohort. Naomi's gaze was steady. She said nothing. The stillness of her posture drew a ripple of discomfort around the long table where 7 interns sat, some pretending to check their notes, others glancing at one another with awkward half-smiles. The silence stretched just long enough for Gregory to mistake it for submission. "All right," he said, turning his attention back to the room as though she no longer existed. "Let's make this quick. We've got a lot to cover." The conference room, perched high in Chicago's Loop District, had all the trappings of old money prestige. Brass door handles polished to a mirror finish, a chandelier that dripped crystal light over the gleaming wood, and an unobstructed view of the morning traffic winding between glass towers. Naomi had been in spaces like this before, only then she had been the one standing at the head of the table, not seated at its far end in a thrift store blazer. She kept her worn leather portfolio in her lap. Inside it, alongside her notebook and pens, rested a slim silver badge that could end this charade in an instant. But revealing it now would cut the story short. She needed the full picture first. Gregory began assigning tasks, his voice carrying the easy arrogance of someone who had never been meaningfully challenged. "Monique, you're shadowing the mergers team this week. Caleb, you'll work with our restructuring group." His gaze landed on Naomi. "You coffee runs, filing, basic admin support. We'll see if you can handle that level of responsibility." The smirk returned. Across the table, one of the younger interns pressed their lips together, as though suppressing a laugh. Naomi wrote the words down in her notebook exactly as he had spoken them. Not because she needed help remembering, but because written records have power in rooms like these. Gregory's eyes drifted to the corner, where Linda Zhao, a department head with a taste for sharp blazers and sharper opinions, sat observing in silence. Naomi noted her watching without intervening. It was a choice. The city outside was alive car horns, the distant rumble of the elevated train, the faint echo of a street saxophonist playing near State Street. In here, the atmosphere was heavy, the air humming with fluorescent light and unspoken judgments. Half an hour passed in that room, long enough for Gregory to build his image of her, compliant, unremarkable, forgettable. That suited Naomi just fine. She had not come here to make a good first impression. When the meeting adjourned, the interns filed out in small knots of conversation, their polished shoes clicking on the marble floor. Naomi was last to leave. At the door, Gregory's voice floated after her, dry with mockery. "Naomi, right? Sounds like something from an old dynasty. Fitting, I suppose things from the past eventually collapse." She stopped, one hand on the polished brass handle, and looked back at him with an expression so calm it might have been carved from glass. "Sometimes," she said, Things from the past are stronger than they look." The faintest flicker passed over his face, something between confusion and irritation. But he waved it away. Outside the boardroom, the hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish. Staff moved briskly from office to office, the muted sound of phones and printers filling the space. Naomi's steps were measured as she walked toward the elevators. She caught sight of Samuel Ortiz, the building's veteran janitor, wheeling his cart in the opposite direction. Samuel's pace slowed when he recognized the new face. His eyes, deep and lined from decades of quiet observation, held hers for a moment longer than courtesy required. It was not curiosity. It was something else, acknowledgement, perhaps. Respect. As the elevator doors opened, Naomi stepped inside, alone. She pressed the button for the 22nd floor, where the intern workstations had been set up in an open-plan space. As the doors closed, her reflection stared back at her from the mirrored panel. Hair pulled neatly back, thrift store blazer sitting square on her shoulders, eyes steady and unblinking. This was only the first move in a day-long game. She already knew the ending. What she didn't know yet were the exact plays her opponent would choose. That was why she was here to watch, to listen, to let the mask of invisibility work in her favor until the time came to remove it. The morning passed with small tasks sorting folders, confirming appointments in a shared calendar, each one another chance to measure the company's culture in miniature. Conversations paused when she approached. Jokes shifted to safer topics. She caught the quick, assessing glances from some employees and the dismissive indifference of others. By the time she returned to the 47th floor to deliver a set of files, Gregory was leaning against a colleague's desk, coffee in hand, recounting the morning meeting as though it had been a personal triumph. Naomi placed the files neatly on the desk and left without comment. But she heard him murmur to the colleague, "She won't last the week." She kept walking. There would be no visible reaction. In the far hallway, a window offered a sliver of the city. She paused for just a moment, watching the midday light spill across the river. Somewhere down there, people were going about their day, unaware of the small war being waged in these carpeted corridors. When she turned the corner, she almost collided with Samuel again. He stepped back, steadying his cart. "Careful there," he said, his voice a low rumble. Then, after a pause, "You keep your head up in this place. They'll test you." His tone was matter-of-fact, not pitying. She gave a small nod. "I've been tested before." He smiled faintly, one corner of his mouth lifting. "Then you know, don't let them think they've read your whole story." It was the first conversation of the day that felt like truth instead of performance. She stored it away with the rest of her notes. Back at her assigned desk, Naomi opened her notebook to a fresh page. She wrote down the date, the time 11:43 and a single sentence. They think the story is theirs to tell. In that moment, she realized Samuel had been watching her as much as she had been watching everyone else. And unlike Gregory, he understood there was more beneath the surface. The afternoon was approaching, and with it, the next move in the game. Naomi met Samuel Ortiz's eyes in the hallway, and for the first time that morning, someone looked at her with quiet respect. The whir of the industrial printer was the only sound in the small, windowless copy room until the door creaked open and a phone camera lens appeared. Naomi had been in the building only a few hours, but she could already feel the shape of the day forming. Gregory Stanton's smirk at the boardroom table, his casual relegation of her to menial work. The coffee spill, none of it had been spontaneous. Each slight was a deliberate stitch in a pattern he was weaving. And now, here she was, standing under humming fluorescent lights, surrounded by rows of gray filing cabinets and the warm, metallic scent of toner. the next piece of the plan quietly falling into place. Her goal was still the same as when she'd stepped into the building that morning. Keep her cover, watch carefully, and record everything. In a place like Sterling and Pierce, the real stories never came from official reports or mission statements. They came from the in-between moments, the way people spoke, when they thought no one important was listening, the choices they made when they thought no one who mattered was watching. The copy room was cramped, with a low ceiling and a stack of unopened paper boxes in the corner. It felt like the exact opposite of the marble-boarded grandeur. Upstairs, this was the building's basement mentality, tucked into a corner of its upper floors. Naomi stood at the center table, neatly arranging contracts into alphabetical order, her fingers moving with the precision of a clockmaker. The door eased open just far enough for a smartphone to peek through. A young intern stepped in, the faint glow of a live stream interface reflecting off their eyes. "Here she is," they said, their voice low and amused. "Hard at work." Naomi didn't look up. The steady sound of the printer was her only reply. A soft shuffle of footsteps came from behind the intern. Samuel Ortiz appeared in the doorway, his rolling janitor's cart stopping just short of the threshold. He took in the scene with a single glance, Naomi's deliberate composure, the intern's phone angled for an audience somewhere beyond the walls. "You got work to do, or you here to bother somebody?" Samuel's voice had a weight to it, the kind of authority earned over decades, not handed down in a promotion. The intern gave a half smile, pretending to be harmless. "Just having a little fun." Samuel stepped forward, his body a quiet barrier between Naomi and the camera. "Go have your fun somewhere else." There was no heat in his voice, just a finality that didn't invite argument. With a dismissive wave, the intern backed out into the hallway, the phone lowering but still pointed in their direction until the door shut. Naomi's hands kept moving, placing each document exactly where it belonged, but she allowed her eyes to meet Samuel's for the first time that day. "Thank you," she said simply. He shrugged, adjusting the tools in his cart. "Been here long enough to know when someone's being set up to fail. You don't look like the type to fail easy." She didn't answer right away, but her lips curved slightly at the corner. "I've had practice." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside in the hallway, the muffled footsteps of employees came and went. In here, it felt like time had slowed just enough to breathe. Samuel picked up one of the stacks she'd finished, noting how each page was squared to the one beneath it. "You do this like it's worth $1 million, he said. "Every piece of paper is worth something to someone," Naomi replied. He nodded once, as if confirming an unspoken truth between them. "Just remember, in this place, the ones who watch everything are the ones who see what really matters." Before she could respond, the door swung open again. Gregory's voice carried in from the hallway, dripping with amusement. "Don't get too comfortable in there, Naomi. It's not exactly a career path." His shoes clicked away on the tile, followed by the low murmur of conversation between him and someone else she couldn't see. Samuel shook his head. "Man likes the sound of his own voice." Naomi gathered another batch of files, the corners of her mind already filing away Gregory's tone, the timing of his entrance, the way he'd chosen to make the comment within earshot of a witness. She wasn't sure yet if Samuel knew just how much he'd already become a part of her record, but she suspected he'd understand when the time came. She finished the last stack and slid it into the cabinet. The metallic clang of the drawer closing echoed in the small room. Samuel glanced toward the door, then leaned in slightly. "You're different from the others, and I think you're here for more than coffee and copies." The statement hung in the air, unhurried and deliberate. Naomi didn't deny it, but she didn't confirm it either. She only closed her notebook, tucking it into her portfolio with the same care she gave to the contracts, and looked up to meet his eyes. Outside, the hallway hummed with the ordinary rhythm of a corporate afternoon. Inside, the air seemed sharper somehow, charged with the unspoken understanding between two people who recognized that what they'd just witnessed was more than it seemed. Samuel's gaze lingered on her a moment longer before he stepped back, easing his cart into the hallway. The faint rattle of the wheels faded into the distance, leaving Naomi alone with the quiet thrum of the printer and the certainty that, before the day was over, Gregory Stanton would make his next move. Samuel leans in and says, "You're different from the others, and I think you're here for more than coffee and copies." David Monroe's voice on the phone was low and urgent. "They're planning something before the day's out. Meet me on level 22. Samuel Ortiz's steady words from the copy room trailed after her like a compass bearing as she stepped into the elevator. "You are here for more than coffee and copies." The car sighed downward, mirrors catching her reflection in Slivers, the thrift store blazer, the calm eyes, the portfolio held like a promise. She reminded herself why she had come to Sterling and Pierce Financial Group, not to win an argument, but to map a pattern, to thread events together so tightly that no one could claim they were random. Her aim this hour was simple. Keep her cover intact, secure proof before the accusation arrived, build the scaffold on which truth could stand without her name attached to it. On level 22, the doors opened to linoleum floors scuffed by years of footsteps, humming vending machines, a microwave with a wavering digital clock, and the faint smell of reheated noodles. The staff break area was the opposite of the marble board room, a pocket of the building where the tone softened, where people's guard slipped. David waited near the window, shoulders squared beneath a worn leather jacket that seemed out of place in the corporate air. He had the posture of a man who had learned to read rooms for a living, the kind of man whose quiet yes meant something. He gestured toward a table against the wall, beneath a television mounted high in the corner. The screen played a local news segment with the sound turned down. A scrolling ticker teased an upcoming Chicago mayoral debate and weather rolling in from the lake. "They're going to try to make it look like you violated a safety policy," he said without preamble. His voice held no drama, only facts. Accessing restricted areas, handling confidential materials you were not cleared to see. He did not launch into a speech about fairness. He did not apologize on behalf of the building. He told her what time the trap would spring. "How do you know?" she asked. "Stairwell between levels 30 and 31, he replied. "I was on rounds earlier. Gregory Stanton, Linda Zhao, and Victor Reyes going over their story. Victor had a printout of the employee handbook. They quoted a section number and laughed about how airtight it sounded. The microwaves ticked and hummed, doors opening and closing, the smell of burnt popcorn edging into the air. A woman from accounting walked in, nodded at David, glanced once at Naomi, and left with a paper cup of tea. The ordinary rhythm of a weekday afternoon beat on around them. Naomi balanced the weight of the moment in her palm, as if it were a small object she could turn and study. "I will need the building's cameras," she said. "Every angle that touched me today. Elevators, corridors, the boardroom hallway, that conference room with the glass walls. Also Gregory's corridor outside his office and the cafeteria line during lunch. Time-stamped, uncut." David's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion but with calculation. "That is a lot of footage." "It is necessary footage," she said. "If they accuse me of walking through doors I did not open, I would like to show exactly where I was and who was with me. If they claim I touched documents, we will see whose laptop was open, whose fingers were on the keys, and who stood close enough to read the screen." He studied her for a heartbeat longer, and then gave a small nod, the kind of nod that seals a pact. "You toured this building a few months back," he said quietly. "Not as an intern." She held his gaze and did not answer. He did not push. The silence between them chose respect. "I can pull feeds for today, starting from opening," he said. "It will take time to collate. I will prioritize the floors you named." "Send the first batch as soon as it is compiled," she said. "I need the earliest clips before the meeting." "What meeting?" "The one where they ask all the interns to assemble," she said simply. "It will be soon." A dull clatter from the vending machine made them both glance over. 2 cans had dropped at once. Someone laughed down the hall, oblivious. Naomi looked back at the television. A photo of the downtown Riverwalk filled the screen above a silent anchor's lips. The ticker crept on. Election dates, school board hearings, a charity run in Hyde Park. She registered the city's pulse like a metronome under their conversation. "Naomi," David said, not unkindly, "why not just walk upstairs and say what you are?" "Because they need to show themselves to themselves," she replied. "If they are capable of framing a stranger, then they are capable of framing a junior analyst who cannot afford a lawyer. Today needs to be about a system, not my name." He accepted that, the way a man who has watched lobbies for years learns to accept the practical geometry of power. "Give me 15 minutes, he said. "Maybe 20. I will send what I can, then keep feeding you batches." She thanked him. He stepped away toward a badge-locked door, keying in a code with a practiced hand. For an instant, she watched him go and thought about how many times he had seen a story like this begin and end without a witness, how many small humiliations he had logged without writing them down. Back upstairs, the air thinned with altitude and glass. Naomi returned to her desk in the intern pod, a row of temporary workstations basking in the glare of overhead lights. The top floor's hush was broken only by the muted burble of a filtered water tap and the clack of keyboards. She placed her portfolio beside the monitor and opened her notebook to a fresh page. The day arrayed itself in lines. Time, place, speaker, words. She copied the details with the same clean loops and disciplined slant taught to children in classrooms where penmanship still mattered. In a corner office, Gregory stood angled toward the window, one hand in his pocket, the other tracing a lazy line along the back of a chair that did not belong to him. Linda Zhao stood closer to the door, arms crossed, mouth set into a line that called itself neutral, and failed. Victor Reyes perched on the edge of a side table, knee bouncing, a printout of the employee handbook folded to a dog-eared corner. "The key is tone," Gregory said, his voice pitched just loud enough to travel through the cracked open door. "Not hostile, not punitive. We are concerned. We are responsible. We cannot risk liability." "Safety is the most defensible angle," Linda said. "If she objects, it is defiance. If she is quiet, it is tacit admission." Victor's laugh was small and mean. "We have Section 4.7, unauthorized access to sensitive materials. It practically writes itself." Gregory smiled, a thin line that never reached his eyes. "Exactly. We want clean paperwork, clean hands." Naomi, passing by with a stack of folders, did not turn her head. She listened the way a stone listens to the current that moves past it wholly without being carried away. She made a note of the section number, the cadence of Linda's neutrality, the way Victor folded pages along the line he planned to cross. At her desk, she organized the folders into 2 piles. One held routine assignments, schedules, contact lists, copies of presentations. The other held notes in her hand, a record of the day's unguarded moments. From time to time, she rose, delivered something to a corner office, returned with a signed form. She flowed through the space the way water flows around stones, picking up nothing on the surface and everything beneath it. A whisper started among the interns, first at the far end of the row, then closer. The music of rumor. Someone heard that a meeting was coming. Someone else heard that the meeting had been scheduled before lunch. Naomi did not join the speculation. She wrote down who had said it. She noted the unease floating behind the chatter, equal parts curiosity and fear. People who do not know how the story will end are always the loudest just before it breaks. From the corridor, the staccato rhythm of Gregory's shoes approached and receded, as if he were pacing his own perimeter. Linda did not move from her office. Victor visited each of the interns with a forced smile and a name-tag friendliness that lay on top of his features like an ill-fitting mask. In the common kitchenette, a stack of paper cups toppled and scattered. Naomi stooped to gather them. One rolled toward a pair of loafers that stopped just short Ethan Cole's shoes, she realized, the only intern who had met her eyes in the boardroom without flinching. He bent to pick up a cup and held it without comment until she stood. A small act, a small pause, and then the string of the day pulled taut again, and they returned to their stations. Outside the east-facing windows, the light shifted from white to warmer gold, polishing the sharp edges of the skyline. The river below winked where the bridges cut it into measured lengths. Far away and down, a siren rose and fell. Naomi listened to the building breathe. Her phone lay face down beside her notebook. When it buzzed, the vibration traveled through the laminate like a moth tapping a lampshade. She did not flip it immediately. She finished the line she was writing, a direct quote from Gregory, through the open door. "We cannot afford liability. Better to remove a variable now." Only then did she turn the phone. A message preview from David. Working. First clips soon. She breathed in and let the air out slowly. The word soon was a bridge. She would walk it when he sent it. She returned to her notes. The shape of the accusation was fully visible now. Safety, access, confidentiality. They had picked a lattice that could support their weight if unchallenged. Near 3 o'clock, the large wall clock in the intern pod ticked over with a mechanical click that a person could miss if they were not listening for it. On the television in the reception alcove, the mayoral debate ticker reappeared, this time paired with a story about funding for public transit. She felt the city's heartbeat through the building's bones. She thought of people leaving work later, jostling onto the elevated train, the metal smell of brakes, and the cool breath of the river as the cars curved across the bridge. Gregory's door opened. Linda and Victor filed out. The three of them conferred in low voices by the glass wall of the corridor. A junior associate paused to ask if they needed anything. Linda's smile flashed and vanished. Victor checked his watch. Gregory folded his arms and nodded once, twice, as if agreeing with himself. A ceiling speaker crackled. The intercom tone, a two-note chime people in buildings learn to anticipate, cut neatly through the pod's soft clatter. Gregory's voice followed, warm with manufactured concern. "Attention, interns. Please report to Conference Room B immediately." The words landed exactly where Naomi had placed them in her mind hours earlier. She closed her notebook. She slid her portfolio under her arm. In the glass above the credenza, her reflection looked back at her, unhurried. Around her, chairs scraped, whispers caught in throats, a rustle of movement like a flock lifting off the water. She rose. The intercom clicked off. Somewhere, a printer shuddered into silence. The city outside glinted. The floor hummed. Naomi smoothed the cuff of her sleeve once, self-contained. As Naomi stands, her phone vibrates. David has sent the first batch of CCTV files. The subject line reads, "Today's Truth." Naomi stepped to Gregory Stanton's laptop, still open to his inbox, and said evenly, "Let's make sure we all have the facts." David's subject line, "Today's Truth," was still fresh in her mind. the words like a pulse under her ribs as she took the few steps to the head of the table. The air in Conference Room B felt electric, charged by the uneasy murmurs of interns and the muffled shuffle of employees gathered outside the glass walls. Gregory stood frozen for half a second, then lunged forward a fraction, as though to block her path, before catching himself. His smile tried for amused patience and missed. This was the moment she had anticipated all day. The goal was no longer quiet documentation. It was exposure, unflinching, and undeniable. If they had been writing a narrative in which she was the careless intern unfit for her seat, she was about to rip the pages out one by one in front of their audience. The conference room smelled faintly of brewed coffee from the carafe in the corner. Outside, the muted backdrop of the office carried on keyboards tapping, phones ringing, the steady hum of HVAC. But here, the silence was total. Naomi rested her portfolio on the table's edge, the smooth leather creasing faintly under her palm. Gregory's voice was tight. "Step away from my computer." "I need to show everyone something important," she said, her tone quiet enough to draw the room in closer. "You're out of line." His gaze flicked toward the hallway. Security. But security did not come. Instead, in the doorway stood David Monroe, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the scene with the focus of someone recording everything in his head. Naomi tapped the trackpad, waking the laptop screen. Gregory's inbox bloomed into view on the projector mounted to the far wall. A quick scroll brought up an email chain dated 3 weeks prior. She clicked it open, and the text appeared in oversized clarity above the long, polished table. Another diversity hire disaster incoming. These people don't belong in our industry. The words landed like a slap. There was a collective intake of breath, the kind of sound that could be felt as much as heard. Outside, the crowd pressed closer to the glass. Gregory's jaw tightened. "This is private." She didn't look at him. "This is company property, sent using company resources, discussing company policy in violation of federal law." Her voice didn't rise, but each syllable carried. A second click, and another thread filled the screen. "Time to raise our standards before we're overrun." The recipients' names were there in black and white: Linda Zhao, Victor Reyes. Linda's face lost all color. Victor's hands twitched against the tabletop. "This is taken out of context," Gregory began, but his voice sounded thinner now, like paper stretched too far. Naomi's fingers moved again. "Reject candidate too ethnic. Won't fit company culture." The date stamp glowed in the corner. She paused just long enough for the words to settle over the room like ash. Phones were out now, not just from the interns, but from the employees crowding the hallway. The click of camera shutters was quiet, almost respectful, like note-taking in a church. Gregory's voice snapped. "Stop this immediately!" "According to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act," she said, "these communications constitute documented intent to discriminate. They are not protected by privacy claims when sent through company systems, and when they form a pattern, they become not just violations but liability." The air thickened. Naomi clicked to the next message. "Found a way around the quotas. Reject on cultural fit. Legal can't touch us." Someone in the hallway muttered an audible, "Wow." Gregory's face was red now, his composure stripped. "You have no authority." She straightened, letting the pause stretch long enough for every eye to fix on her. Then she reached into her portfolio and drew out the platinum badge, holding it up so the light caught its engraved seal. Naomi Carter Ellsworth, Chief Diversity Officer and Board Member, Sterling and Pierce Holdings. It was not shouted, but it struck like a gavel. The interns stared. Ethan Cole's mouth fell open slightly before he caught himself. Outside the glass, a senior associate lowered his phone slowly, as if needing both hands to steady what he had just witnessed. "I have been conducting an undercover assessment of this office's culture for the past 8 hours," she continued. "The results are conclusive." Her hand swept toward the projected emails. "A manager who views diversity as a threat rather than an asset, a system that enables prejudice and hides it under coded language, and a leadership team willing to fabricate violations to protect itself." Gregory laughed once, short and humorless. "This is revenge." "This," she said evenly, "is accountability." In the hall, the crowd shifted, making way for a new arrival. James Morrison, her executive assistant, stepped inside with a leather binder under one arm. "The boardroom is ready for you, Ms. Ellsworth." Naomi let the words hang, scanning the faces in the room, fear in Linda's, calculation in Victor's, defiance melting into desperation in Gregory's. She gathered her portfolio, tucked the badge against her jacket, and turned toward the door. Gregory took one last step toward her. "You're making a mistake." She met his eyes without blinking. The only mistake was thinking no one was watching. Gregory's face drains of color as she says, "You had 8 hours to show decency. Instead, you gave me evidence." The executive boardroom's crystal chandelier reflected in the polished table a mirror for the power about to shift. Her grandfather's voice rose in memory, as if he were standing just behind her. "The higher the floor, the harder the fall." Naomi Carter Ellsworth stood at the head of the table, her portfolio open in front of her, a silent declaration that this room belonged to her just as much as anyone seated here. This was no longer about surviving the day undercover. It was about steering the company's ship through a storm its own leaders had created. The boardroom on the 48th floor was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweep of the Chicago skyline as the sun tilted toward evening, casting gold and violet across the towers. 8 members of the Sterling and Pierce Holdings board sat in high-backed chairs, flanked by legal counsel and advisors. On the far side, facing them like defendants, sat Gregory Stanton, Linda Zhao, Victor Reyes, and Barbara Lang, each wearing the strained expression of someone who knew the evidence was against them. Samuel Ortiz sat quietly near the wall, shoulders squared but eyes steady, a man unused to such grandeur, yet entirely at ease in his own skin. Beside him, David Monroe leaned forward with a tablet in hand, ready to cue the first video clip. Naomi began without theatrics. "We are here because Sterling and Pierce cannot afford the cost, financial or moral, of the conduct documented in this office today. What you will see is not an isolated lapse. It is a pattern." David tapped the screen, and the first video filled the wall-mounted display. Gregory in the boardroom that morning, coffee cup tilting just enough for the dark liquid to spill toward Naomi's shoes, followed by his remark about cleaning up before the real meeting starts. The footage rolled without sound, but the meaning was clear. "Timestamp, 9:15 a.m., Naomi narrated. "Note the deliberate motion. This is not an accident. This is calculated humiliation." Gregory shifted in his seat. "It's a joke." "It is a documented incident of targeted disrespect," Naomi countered smoothly. She moved to the next clip. The so-called educational quiz in the conference room, her correct answers met with visible irritation, followed by Gregory's use of the word breeding. The board members exchanged glances, the word itself heavy in the air even without sound. Legal counsel Patricia Wu scribbled notes in a leather-bound pad. "That term," she said aloud, "has significant legal implications in the context of workplace discrimination." Naomi clicked to the next slide, not video, but an email chain. "This is March 15th. Another diversity hire disaster incoming. These people don't belong in our industry. Sent by Mr. Stanton to Ms. Zhao." Linda's hands knotted in her lap. Victor stared down at the table's edge, as though hoping it would open beneath him. The sequence unfolded. More emails, each one a brick in the wall Gregory and his circle had built to keep certain people out. Rejecting candidates for being too ethnic, strategizing to bypass quotas, boasting that legal can't touch us. Samuel's statement followed. Naomi read it in full. His years watching talented people leave because the atmosphere suffocated them. His recognition of patterns the executives never deigned to see. She saw the flicker of shame on a few board members' faces as his words settled in. Then came the CCTV footage David had compiled, a loop of Gregory, Linda, and Victor huddled in the stairwell, discussing how to frame Naomi for a safety violation. Their voices were faint, but audible enough to catch the phrases, "grounds for immediate dismissal," and "corporate will back us up." The room was utterly still when the clip ended. Naomi laid out the numbers next minority retention at 23% under Gregory's management, compared to 67% company-wide. The cost of turnover, calculated down to the dollar. The correlation between his department's toxic culture and declining productivity. "This is not only unlawful," she said. "It is unprofitable. You have been bleeding talent and revenue to protect prejudice." Board Chairman Robert Hensley spoke at last. "What are your recommendations?" Naomi's reply was immediate. Immediate termination for Mr. Stanton, removal from management for Mr. Reyes, demotion and mandatory training for Ms. Zhao, reassignment of Ms. Lang out of Human Resources, implementation of a comprehensive cultural transformation program over 12 months, overseen by my office. Gregory leaned forward, desperation breaking through his mask. "This is my career you're talking about. I have built this department." "You've hollowed it out," Naomi said, not raising her voice. "You had 8 hours today to act with decency towards someone you thought powerless. You chose cruelty." The vote was called. One by one, hands went up around the table, unanimous on Stanton's termination, unanimous on Reyes's removal, unanimous on Lang's reassignment. Only one abstention on Zhao's demotion, her own family connection to a board member silently acknowledged. Naomi closed her portfolio and looked to Samuel. "The Samuel Ortiz Excellence Fund will be established immediately, $500,000 annually to support underrepresented finance students. You will be involved in selecting recipients." The man's eyes widened slightly, then softened with a gratitude too deep for quick words. Gregory sat frozen, the reality sinking in like a cold tide. Outside the windows, the sun dropped lower, bathing the glass in a copper glow. The city was still moving, oblivious to the reckoning that had unfolded high above its streets. Naomi announced the final line of the meeting. "Tomorrow this building will feel different." 3 months later, the elevator doors opened onto a floor Naomi barely recognized sunlight, open doors, and laughter replacing whispers. Her promise in the boardroom, "Tomorrow, this building will feel different," had not only taken root, but had grown into something visible, something that could be felt the moment she stepped onto the carpet. The hush of fear that used to hang in the air had been replaced by a low, warm hum of collaboration. For the first time, Sterling and Pierce's 47th floor looked alive. Her goal today was not confrontation, but observation. She had come to see how the reforms had taken shape, to witness whether the culture shift was more than numbers on a quarterly report. The morning light poured through the east-facing windows, painting long gold rectangles across the new open-plan workstations. The framed corporate portraits of past executives had been replaced by photographs of recent scholarship recipients, each with a small caption telling their story. Ethan Cole spotted her first. He had traded the hesitant stiffness of an intern for the easy confidence of a full-time junior analyst. "Good morning, Ms. Ellsworth." he said, smiling. Feels strange not to call you Naomi. She smiled back. Feels strange to be up here without a cover story. They walked together toward the new collaboration lounge, where clusters of employees worked side by side, sharing screens and notes. Ethan gestured at the open space. It's night and day. People actually want to be here. We're talking about ideas, not politics. We had a pitch meeting last week where 3 different departments chimed in, and nobody cared who came up with what. Samuel Ortiz joined them, stepping out from his new office, a modest corner room with a clear view of the floor and a wooden nameplate that read, Facilities Director. He wore a pressed blue shirt, the frayed collars of his old work uniforms nowhere in sight. You're just in time, he said, grinning. Scholarship applications came in yesterday. You have to see these. He led Naomi into his office, where a stack of manila folders sat neatly on the desk beside a signed Chicago Cubs baseball. He opened one at random. Here's a first-generation college student from Englewood. Wants to go into sustainable finance. This kid's essay would knock you over. Naomi skimmed the first page, her fingers pausing over a handwritten line. I want to build a company where people work because they believe in the mission, not because they're afraid to leave. The words made her throat tighten. You'll make a good judge of character, she told Samuel. David Monroe appeared in the doorway, now in a fitted suit with a badge clipped neatly to his lapel, head of security operations. Media crew's here for the interview, he said. Conference room is ready. The team from Fortune had set up in a glass-walled meeting space, cameras angled to catch the skyline in the background. The lead journalist, a woman in her 50s with the posture of someone who'd weathered her share of high-stakes interviews, greeted Naomi warmly. Your Ellsworth method is being adopted by companies in 4 other states. How does that feel? It feels like proof, Naomi said. Proof that dignity and profitability are not opposites. The interview ranged from the anonymous reporting system 47 incidents addressed in 3 months to the AI-driven language monitoring that flagged discriminatory phrases before they could take root. Naomi described how these tools were designed not to punish, but to educate, and how that shift had allowed people to change without fear. And Gregory Stanton? The journalist asked. Mr. Stanton is no longer in the financial services industry, Naomi said simply. The conversation closed with a question about legacy. What would you like this place to be known for in 10 years? For being a place where no one has to fight to be seen, Naomi answered without hesitation. After the crew packed up, Naomi wandered the floor again. She passed the new coffee cart run by a minority-owned vendor, heard laughter spilling from a break room where before there had been silence, and saw a project meeting that included voices from all levels of the company. Back in her office, a sealed envelope waited on the desk. The handwriting on the front was familiar. She slid a finger under the flap and unfolded the letter. Ms. Ellsworth, it began. I wanted you to know I just accepted a position at a major investment firm. After what happened here before you came, I thought I was done with this industry. You gave me the courage to try again. It was signed by a former analyst she remembered from Samuel's early accounts, one of the many who had left under Gregory's reign. She set the letter down and stepped to the window. The skyline stretched wide before her, bathed in the late afternoon glow. Somewhere out there, other offices still operated in shadows. Other voices were still going unheard. She knew the work wasn't finished, but here, at least, the tide had turned. Naomi steps to her window, looking out over Chicago, and says softly, "One building at a time." From the moment Naomi Carter Ellsworth stepped into that marble-floored boardroom as a supposed intern, the day was set in motion like a slow-turning wheel. It began with a deliberate coffee spill, a dismissive remark, and the calculated ease of a man who believed his authority was unshakable. It would have been easy for her to answer insult with anger, to defend herself in the moment and reveal who she truly was. But Naomi chose a harder road to endure, to listen, and to gather the kind of truth that could not be dismissed as opinion. In the stillness of her gaze, she carried the weight of experience and the discipline of someone who knew that premature confrontation can leave the deepest wrongs unexposed. She recorded each moment, not only the words spoken but the intent behind them. She saw who laughed, who looked away, and who stepped forward when the cost of speaking was low. Gregory Stanton thought he was crafting a day of humiliation for a powerless subordinate. In reality, he was building the case that would end his career and change the culture of an entire company. The allies emerged quietly, as they often do. Samuel Ortiz, with his steady kindness, shielded her from the petty cruelty of a live-streaming intern. David Monroe, sharp-eyed and deliberate, brought her the unblinking testimony of CCTV footage. Ethan Cole, in a small but telling moment, bent to pick up a paper cup without turning it into a spectacle. They each played their part, proving that in the fight for dignity, the chorus is as important as the solo voice. By mid-afternoon, the trap Gregory had prepared for Naomi was set. But what he did not know was that her net was already cast wider than his imagination could stretch. When she stood before the glass-walled conference room and revealed his own words, ugly, coded, and repeated over months, she did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The truth, when clear and undeniable, speaks loud enough on its own. Her reveal was not just the turning of a page, it was the tearing down of a facade. In an instant, the intern in a thrift store blazer became the chief diversity officer and board member, whose authority reached higher than Gregory's career ever would. The crowd outside saw not only her power, but the deception they themselves had participated in, whether through silence or complicity. And when she walked into the boardroom that evening, she carried with her the weight of an unbroken chain of evidence. The reckoning that followed was precise and unapologetic. Gregory was terminated for cause. His co-conspirators were demoted or reassigned. And in a single symbolic gesture, Naomi established the Samuel Ortiz Excellence Fund, proving that in her hands, justice was not only about removal, but about planting something better in the soil left behind. 3 months later, the transformation was visible. The 47th floor no longer carried the stale air of fear. It was filled with light, conversation, and collaboration. People spoke up without glancing over their shoulders. The anonymous reporting system caught and addressed incidents before they could fester into culture. The AI language monitor taught rather than punished, giving people the chance to grow instead of merely hiding their flaws. Naomi saw the change not only in metrics, but in faces, Ethan's quiet confidence, Samuel's pride in his office and his scholarship recipients, David's new authority as head of security operations. Even those who had once been silent bystanders seemed to stand a little taller. And beyond these walls, the Ellsworth method began to take root in other companies, proving that change, once lit, could spread. Gregory Stanton became a cautionary tale, a reminder that arrogance blinds and that prejudice dressed as company culture is still prejudice. His name would be tied to the viral footage of his downfall for as long as memory held it. And while some might see that as revenge, Naomi knew it was simply consequence, the natural result of repeated choices made without regard for humanity. The letter from a former employee, once driven out by bias, was proof enough for Naomi that the work mattered. "I thought I was done with this industry," the letter read. "You gave me the courage to try again." Those words were worth more than any headline or interview. Through it all, Naomi's philosophy remained: respect should never depend on someone's title, status, or ability to fight back. True leadership shows itself in how we treat those we think cannot harm or help us. Policies are only paper if they do not live in the hearts of the people who follow them. And the fight for dignity is not won in a single day. It is sustained by constant attention, by the courage to notice, and by the willingness to act when it would be easier to stay quiet. Her story reminds us that systemic bias hides behind polished doors and polite language, and that confronting it requires more than outrage. It takes patience, strategy, and allies who understand the stakes. It asks us to risk comfort for the sake of truth, to put our names and reputations behind what is right. And it challenges us to measure our own workplaces, our own communities, against the standard of genuine respect. In the end, the greatest power Naomi wielded was not her title, her authority, or even the evidence she brought to the boardroom. It was her refusal to let their version of the story define her worth. It was her insistence that change must be structural, not cosmetic. It was her understanding that dignity is not something granted by those in power. It is claimed and then defended. If you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever watched someone else be diminished for who they are, Naomi's journey is an invitation to take notes, to keep receipts, to find your allies, and when the time is right, to step into the room and tell the truth so plainly that it can never be buried again. If you like the story, then leave it number 1. Subscribe to our channel to hear the next story.